What I told my wife, looking back in hindsight, I realized that I should have noticed something was going on weeks ago. For more than 7 weeks, my wife Brianne had been unusually attentive towards me. She started making me breakfast out of the blue, good breakfasts, too. Instead of the usual toast and coffee, she began preparing my favorite dinners, even serving wine. After dinner, she would change into something new and become very affectionate before leading me to bed early in the evening. I had been thinking about these changes. After 24 years of marriage, I had happily accepted them as part of our new normal since our youngest child left for college just a few months ago. I also wanted to do more for Bree. I made an effort to get home every evening, never later than 5 p.m. I started taking her to nice restaurants, and we went to small local plays. For the first time in months, we went dancing. I gave her flowers. I was ready to enjoy the benefits of life without kids at home. My name is Tyler Winslow, my nickname is Ty. My wife, Brianne, and I have been together for nearly a quarter of a century. I thought that, like any marriage, we had our ups and downs, but the good moments far outweighed the bad ones. I was happy with my life. I work for a large publishing house, and over the years, I've become skilled in all aspects of publishing, editing and reviewing manuscripts, meeting with authors, negotiating terms, collaborating with designers, developing schedules, budgets, marketing expenses, and handling film rights. I take great pride in presenting a new book and a new author to the public. So, after 20 years of extensive experience, I was promoted to senior director of the company. My wife, Bree, is an incredibly beautiful woman, nearly 45 years old. Both of us are in good shape, thanks to good genes, an active lifestyle, and healthy eating. People often tell us we make a great-looking couple. Since returning to work after our youngest child started kindergarten, Bree has been working as a legal assistant at the large law firm Thomas, Dixon Harris. She became the manager of the legal assistants, distributing tasks that come into her office among the junior assistants. My life took a drastic turn last Wednesday. I arrived home as usual, around 5 p.m., and Bree was busy in the kitchen preparing dinner. Over the past few weeks, she had been cooking meals that were far better than what we used to have before the kids grew up. I kissed the back of her head as I walked into the kitchen. Normally, at that moment, Bree would turn around and give me a proper kiss, but this time she didn't. "I don't deserve the passionate kisses I've been getting for the past 2 months," I exclaimed. "What's going on?" "Nothing," she replied, "but I'm glad my husband is home," she added instead. She never took her eyes off the work she was doing on the countertop. She seemed a bit distant, as if she didn't want to look at me, not even for the few seconds it would take to turn around and kiss me. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "You seem busy." "No, nothing, absolutely nothing," she answered. "Go get changed, and when you come back down, you'll have a glass of your favorite wine." It felt like she was trying to send me out of the kitchen rather than sharing a few tender moments. I brushed off the feeling that something was wrong and went upstairs to our bedroom. After hanging up my suit and tossing my shirt in the laundry basket, I changed into some comfortable slacks and a collarless sweatshirt. Dinner wasn't fancy, but it looked like Bree had made an effort to make it especially pleasant. She had been doing this for months. The meal consisted of a chopped lettuce and tomato salad, followed by the main course, roast pork on a bed of shredded cauliflower. As we clinked our wine glasses, Bree said, "You know I love you, right?" It sounded different from her usual, "I love you," followed by my customary, "I love you, too." After dinner, we cleared the table. Bree put away the leftovers, while I took care of the dishes and loaded the dishwasher. As I was doing this, Bree said she was going upstairs to change into something more comfortable. I could hardly wait to see what she meant. When I entered the living room, the lights were dim, and Bree was lying seductively on the couch. Her nightgown barely covered her, and I wasted no time kneeling beside the couch to kiss her. It was an intense kiss. From there, I kissed her bare shoulders and gently pulled aside what little fabric she was wearing. She was beautiful, and I couldn't help but admire her. "You love me, right? You'll always love me, no matter what?" she asked softly. "Of course I will," I replied without hesitation. I got up and undressed as quickly as I could, then lay down beside her on the couch. There was no point in going upstairs, we both couldn't wait. About half an hour later, we lay cuddled together, feeling closer than we had in a long time. "I'm glad we've reignited some of the passion we lost over the years," I said, gently kissing her neck and throat. Our conversation shifted to how good she looked for someone approaching 45. "You could easily pass for 30 or 35, I told her. Bree smiled and complimented me in return, running her hand over my abdomen. She said she appreciated how well I took care of my body, too. I was half asleep when Bree suddenly said, "Honey, I need to talk to you about something." "Anything," I replied lazily. "First of all," she began, "you know how much I love you, right?" "Yes, and I love you just as much," I answered. "Honey," she said so softly I barely heard her. "This Friday, I've made plans for the evening, with a man from my office." It took a few seconds for her words to sink in. When they did, I sat up and looked her straight in the eyes. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice firm. She tried to pull my head back down to where it had been resting, but I resisted. "What are you doing?" I repeated. "It won't affect how we feel about each other. I'll still love you, and you'll still love me." "Are you joking? Is this some kind of prank?" I asked. "No, honey, it's not a joke. I have a date on Saturday with a man, a lawyer from my office. We're going to have dinner, dance, and then go to his hotel room. I'll stay with him all night and come back home sometime Sunday morning." "In other words, you're going to spend all night Saturday and Sunday morning being intimate with him, right?" "Please, don't use those terms, they're so. He's a very nice person, and I really like him." Now I was fully awake and listening intently to what she was saying. I started getting dressed to signal that our time together was over. It was obvious to Bree that I wasn't happy. "Please, Ty, don't be like this. I still love only you, and you still love only me. It'll only be this once, and then everything will end. A week from now, we'll be back to how we are, and you'll forget all about it." "I don't think so, Bree," I said, exhaling sharply. "Are we fine now? Do you want to ruin our marriage completely?" Bree, now putting on her satin robe, responded, "I don't want to tell you his name because it's not important, and I don't want you trying to get revenge on him. Besides, he's bigger than you, and he'll probably hurt you in a fight." With rage on my side and a baseball bat in my hands, "I doubt it," I answered. "It'll be only this one time because he's leaving Sunday night for his job in New York and won't be coming back. He'd better leave town," I said. "Otherwise, the next time he enters the courtroom, he'd better be on crutches." Beyond my initial reaction of anger at Bree's announcement, I started feeling a sense of loss. Bree and I had been together for more than 20 years. She had been my only partner since we lost our virginity to each other in our senior year of high school. I'd been tempted, but I never touched another woman. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "It's not an affair. We've barely touched." "What do you mean by barely touched?" "I want to know, does that mean holding hands, hugging, kissing? Does it include touching?" Bree didn't answer my questions, which led me to believe that things had reached the point of physical contact, otherwise, she would have admitted to only minor forms of affection. "He was recommended to us 6 months ago by a prestigious law firm in New York to work on a particularly complex tax case. Because of its complexity, I and several other assistants did a lot of research. I also worked closely with him to develop charts and tables that we'll use in court. Over time, we grew very close. 2 months ago, he told me he had strong feelings for me and wanted to sleep with me. We weren't going to sneak away to a cheap motel or stay late at the office to do it on some desk. Our relationship was special and too valuable for that kind of cheap connection. We wanted one special night just for us. He asked me to come up with an excuse to leave for a weekend or at least one night. I told him I doubted I could come up with an excuse that would cover such a long period. Besides, I didn't want to lie to my husband. He asked if my husband would be willing, or could be persuaded, to let us be together for a day, a night, or a weekend. I told him I knew how deeply you love me, but I wasn't sure if you would divorce me over a one-time affair. I didn't believe it, especially if you knew it would be a single episode and never happen again, but I wasn't certain. Why would you want to do this to our marriage, Bree? We have everything you could want in a relationship. We love each other, we have great kids, no more money problems, and our health is good. Because my friend convinced me I was missing something. You're the only man I've ever been with. I feel like I need to experience more. He showed me that there's something else. With him, it feels right. I already feel like a complete woman. Besides, he cares about me, and I have feelings for him too. This isn't a romantic affair. But, Bree, I exclaimed, we have a wonderful union. You're the only woman I've ever been with, and I'm the only man you've ever been with. You don't understand, Ty. I need this. I want this, I want him, she responded. Why do you need it? I asked. He's an incredibly handsome man, much younger than me, but he still finds me irresistible. I'm attracted to him like a moth to a flame. I just need to be with him at least once, otherwise, I'll never feel satisfied again, she said. He feels the same way about me. Please, honey, let me do this. Then I'll be yours forever. I will never agree to this, I objected. It will destroy our relationship and our marriage. It won't, she insisted. Honey, let me do this, and I'll be the most wonderful wife you can imagine. I'll cook for you, take care of the house, do the laundry, go shopping, and everything else. I'll be the best partner you could ever dream of. You can do whatever you want with me anytime. I'll treat you like a king for the rest of your life, and I'll never touch another man again, I promise. Except I'll have a wife who slept with another man and humiliated me, I replied. For a man, this is the ultimate sign of disrespect. You'll have to deal with it. I'm going to do this, Ty. I need to get this out of my system with my friend. It won't change anything between us. I'll still love you, and you'll still love me, she said. So that's why you've been so attentive and affectionate with me over the past 2 months. It had nothing to do with us becoming empty nesters. You thought that if you courted me, I'd be less likely to lose you over a one-time affair and more likely to accept your request for a date. That's not going to happen, I told her. Bree stood firm against all my arguments and protests. Her decision was made, and she had no intention of changing it. I didn't plan to beg, she would have to face the consequences, whatever they might be. I didn't know what those would be yet. I went upstairs to the master bedroom, gathered a few things for the next day, along with some toiletries, and moved into the guest room, which, in our large house, had its own bathroom. Bree intercepted me as I was moving my things. Please, don't be like this, Ty. Nothing will change. I know you're a little angry right now, but everything will be over by Sunday afternoon, and we can go back to being ourselves again, she said. I'm not just a little angry. If you go through with this, I said very calmly but firmly, we will never be ourselves again. I closed the door to the guest room without saying another word. Left alone with my thoughts, I considered all the obvious alternatives: divorce, moving out, kicking her out, which was my favorite option, physically preventing her from going on the date, calling her parents, calling our kids, and more. But I couldn't divorce her. Despite her temporary lapse in judgment, I was still madly in love with her. I dismissed my other obvious options. I had no intention of leaving my own house. Besides, no matter what happened, Bree would try to make things better afterward. I'd have a wife who would go out of her way to please me, and I wasn't going to call our family and tell them everything because I wanted to keep this issue between us. If she decided to cancel her affair because her family talked her out of it, it would mean she had been influenced by external factors. It could also lead to her hiding any future affairs if she ever considered something like this again. If she decided not to meet her Prince Charming, it had to be a decision she made herself, based on the merits of our marriage. It was late at night. Bree had undoubtedly waited until almost the last possible moment to announce her date, limiting the time I had to deal with my anger and the time I had to convince her that going through with the date was a bad idea. The lack of time also limited my ability to prevent her from going. My mind was racing. I was terrified of losing my wife. She said she had feelings for this guy. Maybe now that the kids were gone, she was thinking about leaving me for him. That would completely break my heart. After she slept with him, she might prefer being with him instead of me. Or maybe she'd be interested in exploring things with other men in the future. We had been together for 25 years, and there weren't many surprises left in bed. Still, I found making love to her comfortable and pleasurable, even after 25 years. Her body still excited me. I felt thrilled at the thought of seeing her in a negligee or a tight black dress that accentuated her figure, or even just wrapped in a towel. Then I thought, maybe I could interfere with her plans. Perhaps I could somehow prevent that date from happening. If Prince Charming disappeared before he could set up another meeting, I would have time to talk to my wife and make it clear that she was taking a huge risk, while also exacting a small, harmless revenge to ensure she never considered doing something like this again. Before falling asleep on Thursday night, I came up with a plan. It seemed unlikely that I could convince Bree not to see her Prince Charming, but maybe her boss could. I knew that at Thomas, Dix & Harris, there was a strict policy against fraternization between employees. If I mentioned Bree's relationship to one of the partners, perhaps they would talk to her and make her see how her job could be at risk by getting involved with an associate partner. I was the first to get up the next day. Although I usually made her coffee, I didn't this time. She said, "Good morning," but I didn't respond. "Don't do it," was all I said, and shortly after, I left the house without the usual goodbye kiss. I was sure she noticed how cold my attitude was. My plan, if it could be called that, was to speak with the managing partner, William Thomas. I had met him several times over the years at various social events hosted by the firm. He seemed like a nice guy, easy to talk to and relaxed. Despite the personal nature of my request, I wanted to inform him about what was happening between Bree and the unknown New Yorker from their office. Perhaps he could talk to her about the potential consequences of her date the following night. I wasn't a lawyer, but I figured Thomas, Dix & Harris wouldn't want to risk a potential lawsuit from my wife if she got upset with the firm for any reason. By mid-morning on Friday, I drove to the Thomas, Dix & Harris office building downtown. I took the elevator to the top floor, where the three partners had their offices and where the large meeting rooms for their most important clients were located. The lobby was a spacious area with a desk in the center. To the right was a waiting area with cushioned chairs, a sofa, and a coffee table. To the left, a fully stocked bar was integrated into the cabinetry. The walls were decorated with sleek, expensive modern paintings. I had been in that space a few times during small social events with Bree. Manning the entrance to the partners' offices was Emily Stratton. I also knew Emily from various local parties and social events over the years. We were friends. Emily was probably the friendliest person in the firm. She always had a smile on her face and was in a good mood. Emily was around 55 years old, but her age did nothing to diminish her beauty. Her face was fairly ordinary, or at least not the kind of beauty you'd expect from a movie star, but I thought she was a beautiful person. She was about 1.63 meters tall without shoes, and her figure was something to admire. She never wore clothing that accentuated her feminine features. She always dressed in a jacket with either matching pants or a skirt. If it was a skirt, it usually reached down to her ankles, with a small slit that stopped at the knee. That was enough to reveal her beautiful calves. Sometimes I saw her without a jacket, and if she wasn't wearing a loose blouse, it was a baggy sweater. Emily recognized me as soon as I entered through the carved glass doors. She smiled and got up to walk toward me, giving me a hug. Although I was in a gloomy and dejected mood, it was impossible not to return her smile. "Ty. It's been so long since I've seen you. Did you come here just to see me?" she asked playfully. "I need to speak with Mr. Thomas." "It's important and personal," I told her. "I only need a few minutes of his time." Emily could read the seriousness of my request from the expression on my face. "It's about your wife, isn't it?" Emily asked astutely. I liked Emily, and I didn't want to burden her with my marital problems. "Maybe," was all I responded. Emily put on her glasses and began reviewing the partner's daily schedule. "Mr. Thomas is finishing up a meeting. He has about 30 minutes before he leaves for an important client lunch. When he returns to his office, I'll intercept him for you and ask him to give you a moment," she said. While waiting for Thomas to return to his office, I sat in the lounge area. I hadn't been there long when Emily approached me with a cup of coffee. "I added a little Bailey's," she said. "Looks like you could use it." Just then, Emily's intercom buzzed. "I'm back in my office, Emily," I heard Mr. Thomas say. Emily seized the opportunity. "Mr. Thomas, I have Tyler Winslow here. He'd like to speak with you for a few minutes." "It's important to him," she said. I heard Thomas consider his schedule. "If you think it's important, Emily, send him in. I can give him about 5 minutes before I have to leave." Emily guided me through another set of glass doors, down a short hallway, to a large carved wooden door. The sign read William Thomas, attorney. She opened the door, gestured for me to enter, and then closed it behind me. I found myself in a spacious office. Mr. Thomas stood beside a large desk at one end of the room, with several chairs in front of it. At the other end of the office was a sitting area with an armchair, a sofa, and a coffee table. Mr. Thomas's degrees and accolades were framed and hung on the walls. Mr. Thomas walked around his desk, approached me, and extended his hand for a handshake. "Ty, good to see you. How have you been? Still with the publishing company?" "I'm fine," I replied without much enthusiasm. "Well, Ty, if Emily thinks it's important for you to talk to me, then it's important to me. What's troubling you?" Suddenly, I felt uncertain about what I wanted to say to Mr. Thomas, but I began explaining what I had planned to tell him. "I'm sorry to bother you with this, Mr. Thomas, and now I feel embarrassed about it." "What's going on in your life, Ty?" he asked, sounding genuinely interested in my problem. "The thing is, Mr. Thomas, my wife, Bree, informed me that she intends to sleep with one of your associates this Saturday. She insists on going through with the date, and I haven't been able to dissuade her." Mr. Thomas was a very perceptive lawyer. "And you want me to intervene in some way to stop this? Maybe talk to Bree or to one of the associate partners, right? That was my original goal when I entered your office, Mr. Thomas. But I've changed my mind. This is my problem, and I need to solve it myself without burdening anyone else. I'm sure you know we have a policy against fraternization, especially when employees work in the same department and one has authority over the other. This could expose us to a potential lawsuit if their relationship turns sour. Bree is our lead legal assistant. She's been here for a long time and has dealt with many hot-tempered lawyers. I hired these attorneys because they had exceptional qualifications in their areas of expertise, and I hired them because they were relentless in achieving my goals. I was the same way when I practiced as a trial lawyer, and I'm not entirely proud of how I behaved around the women who worked with me. So, Bree has had to deal with these types for years. It's hard to believe that one of them could succeed in winning her over." "Yes, sir," was all I could say. Mr. Thomas placed a hand on my shoulder. "Our fraternization policy should have been revised and made much more binding, with concrete consequences for violations. However, I can't enforce it by Saturday. You know how lawyers are, they need to draft it, study it, consult with other attorneys, and so on before it's finalized. Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Thomas. I'm very sorry I came to you with this. This is my problem, and I can handle it on my own. I turned around and left, returning to the reception area where Emily was waiting for me. How did it go? She asked. I shouldn't have brought this issue to Mr. Thomas. I feel stupid, I replied. Then I asked her if I could relax for a few minutes in the lounge. Of course you can. I'll bring you another coffee, with something extra, or maybe something stronger if you prefer, she said. I sat down in one of the cushioned chairs to think. I felt helpless. I couldn't stop Bree from going on her date with Prince Charming. I put my head in my hands and started feeling sorry for myself. Then I heard Emily say, "It's too early to drink. Let's go have lunch." I thought spending some time with Emily would be a good idea. It would help clear my mind. She used her intercom to call a colleague and asked her to cover for her until she returned from an extended lunch break. Then she took my arm, and we left for a restaurant Emily particularly liked. We started with iced tea, but before ordering, Emily said she wanted to know what was troubling me. I told her the whole story. After that, we placed our orders and chatted for a while as I picked at my Caesar salad and Emily enjoyed her soup and half a sandwich. After the meal, we ordered coffee. We both sat in silence until Emily said something unexpected. Did you know that my late husband was a fighter pilot? I knew you were a widow and that your husband had passed away a long time ago, but I didn't know he was a fighter pilot. Yes, he was a fighter pilot. I married him a week after he graduated from the Air Force Academy. He spent a year in pilot training before being assigned to the A-10. He spent 6 months training on the A-10 before we were sent to our first permanent base, Davis-Monthan Air Force Base near Tucson. I knew the A-10 was an attack aircraft acquired by the Air Force to support ground troops. Its official name was Thunderbolt II, in honor of the World War II aircraft. Most pilots called it the Warthog because it was an ugly plane and always flew at low altitudes. So died 6 years later during an air combat training mission. An inexperienced teammate accidentally collided with his plane. During those 6 years, So was deployed to the Middle East twice. He must have completed some notable missions because he was awarded the Silver Star, the Distinguished Flying Cross, and 2 Bronze Stars. Emily was on the verge of tears as she spoke about her late husband. He has always been my hero, she said. Maybe that's why I never remarried. However, the point of my story is that So used to talk a lot about his training, especially in air combat. Some of the exercises were offensive, but most were defensive since the A-10 was slower compared to other fighter jets. He described a scenario called 1 versus 2, where an enemy fighter attacked their 2-plane formation from behind. So would order a sharp turn to evade a potential missile attack. If his wingmen stayed in formation, the enemy fighter treated them as a single target and could destroy both So and his wingmen in a single strike. So, the A-10s executed what's so-called defensive separation. At this point, the inner A-10 in the turn would drop lower while the other A-10 climbed higher. The attacker now had to choose. If he continued pursuing the lower A-10, the higher A-10 would end up on his tail. If he attacked the higher A-10, the lower one would return to the fight and take down the attacker. The point is, every decision the enemy made was wrong, and So's team always won. I was impressed by Emily's knowledge of combat tactics, but I didn't yet understand her point. We're still talking about Bree's date, right? I asked. Emily looked at me and said, give her one. No matter what she chooses, you win. At that moment, Emily took my hand, looked me in the eyes, and gave me the most alluring smile I had ever seen. After lunch with Emily, I returned to work. I stayed late because I didn't want to spend the evening with Bree. I even went to my favorite dinner club, the Iris Club, to have a few drinks with friends. When I got home, it was 10 p.m., and Bree was waiting for me. You didn't even call to say you'd be late. I worked hard to prepare a nice dinner for us. It's in the refrigerator if you want something to eat. I was also hoping you might come back to our bed tonight and make love to me, she said. Then she noticed that I was slightly drunk. You're drunk, she stated. I stayed late because I didn't want to deal with you tonight, and I had a few drinks to forget about what you're going to do tomorrow night. Now I'm drunk, and I'm going to bed. You're welcome, Bree, I replied. Don't worry about tomorrow night, it will pass and be in the past before you know it. Everything will be back to normal, she said. I ignored her and went straight to the guest room. I closed the door, undressed, and went to bed. Surprisingly, I woke up early the next morning. After some coffee and toast, I started my weekend chores, mowing the lawn, pulling weeds, and other tasks. When I came back inside, Bree was getting ready to go out. I'm going to the spa, and then I'll get a manicure and pedicure, she announced. I'll be back in 3 or 4 hours. I simply grabbed another cup of coffee and watched her leave without saying a word. Just before she walked out the door, I said, Don't do this, Bree. This won't end well for you. I showered, got dressed, and went to the supermarket. By midday, Bree was back. It was obvious she had gotten ready for her date. Her hair was styled in an elaborate updo, and her nails, even her toenails, were painted a bright red. I had been busy too. As Bree walked through the living room and family room, she noticed something unusual and stopped. Ty, she called out from the kitchen. Why is the rug rolled up, and why is the coffee table pushed against the wall? Looking up from the kitchen, I said, I made room for a dance floor. I also moved the big sofa toward the fireplace. Why are you doing this? Bree asked. I'm doing it for you, I replied. I'm going to convince you to stay home tonight and have a romantic evening with me. Come to the kitchen, I said. Let me show you what's waiting for you. As Bree followed me, I pointed out that the dining table was set for 2, with our best china and glassware, complemented by our silver cutlery. A large bouquet of roses was in the center of the table, with a candle on each side to set the mood. The table was arranged like in an expensive restaurant, with 2 forks to the left of the plate, a knife and 2 spoons to the right, and a dessert spoon placed horizontally above the plate. A crystal water glass stood at each place setting. I know what you're trying to do, Ty, but it won't work. You know I have plans for tonight, Bree said. I know your plans, Bree, but plans can change when something better comes up. Would you rather disappoint me or Prince Charming? Please, Ty, don't do this to yourself, she said. Let me try, I said, after a brief pause. After dinner, I'll serve dessert, a small dish of vanilla ice cream with a hint of green mint cream. Then we'll have coffee with the liqueur of your choice. For music, I picked my favorite album, A Stormy Night by Misty Moves. It's soft instrumental music with the sounds of rain and a slowly approaching storm until it's right overhead. It's perfect for slow dancing. And, of course, we'll have a fire burning in the fireplace. Ty, I need to get ready to go. I bought a new dress for tonight, and I don't want to be late, Bree announced, disappearing upstairs toward the bedroom. When I heard the shower turn on, I went upstairs and changed into my black slacks, a black cotton shirt, and dancing shoes. A suit and tie would have been too formal for a dinner at home. When Bree reappeared downstairs, she was dressed to kill. She wore a classic black dress with a deep neckline. The dress was short, ending just above her knees, but the skirt had a slit that reached almost halfway up her thigh. I could see the upper part of her legs. She wore black 4-inch heels adorned with small diamonds on the straps. How do I look? She asked. I was angry, but I continued to show restraint and maintained an almost cheerful attitude. You look great, like you're ready to, I replied, trailing off. It would be nice to know you dressed like that for me and not for your Prince Charming. It's a special occasion, Ty, and I want to look good. I'll dress like this for you another time, she said. Just then, I heard George Michael's Careless Whisper playing on Sirius Radio, one of my favorite songs for slow dancing. I turned up the volume and said, "May I have a dance before you go, Bree?" She seemed a bit hesitant at first but then said, "Of course." I walked over to her and took her in my arms. We danced cheek to cheek, just as we always did when we slow danced. I liked feeling her close to me. "You're wearing my favorite cologne," she said. "English leather," I replied. Toward the end of the song, I began planting soft butterfly kisses on the side of her face. She seemed to enjoy it and purred softly, like a kitten. Maybe I can win her back, I thought. I let go of her right hand and moved mine to the strap of her dress, gently sliding it off her shoulder while planting a real kiss on the side of her neck. She froze. "Ty, don't do this. You know I'm leaving." "We can do this another time," she said. "It's not too late to change your mind," I whispered. "I'm not going to do that, Ty. I'm going on this date, and I don't want you to ruin it," she responded. "Don't worry, Bree. I won't interfere anymore. I see that you've made your decision, and it's final. However, there are two things I want you to do before you walk out that door." Bree looked at me suspiciously. "First, I want you to see how the dining table looks with the candles lit and the lights dimmed, and I want you to remember how romantic it looks when you walk out that door." I lit the candles and dimmed the lights. "We can have a romantic dinner next week, okay?" I walked over to her, took her left hand in mine, and slipped off her engagement and wedding rings. "I don't want you touching Prince Charming while wearing the rings I gave you on the day of our engagement and wedding." Bree seemed troubled as she placed her rings next to mine on the small table in the hallway. She looked a little embarrassed, and the only thing she said was, "Okay." As Bree turned to grab her shawl and purse, the doorbell rang. We could see a silhouette through the etched glass of the door. Who could it be at this hour, she wondered aloud. Since I was closer to the door, I opened it. It was Emily. "What are you doing here?" Bree asked sharply. I walked around Bree and extended my hand to help Emily step over the threshold into the hallway. Now Bree's attention shifted to the cocktail dress Emily was wearing. It was a stark contrast to the conservative secretary image Bree was used to seeing at work. The dress was provocative, red, off the shoulder, and barely held up by two delicate spaghetti straps tied in small bows. A gentle tug on either bow would cause the dress to fall to the floor. The dress wasn't short, it reached the middle of her calves, but it had a daring slit that went up to the top of her French-style stockings. Her hair was styled elegantly, adorned with a wide red ribbon. She didn't just look good, she looked stunning. "Ty invited me when he dimmed the lights in the dining room," Emily said bluntly. "He promised me a candle at dinner, slow dances to romantic music, cozy cuddles by the fireplace, and a whole night of passion. How could any girl say no to that?" "You look so different than you do at work," Bree blurted out involuntarily. "I like dressing up for special occasions," Emily responded. Then she added, "And you look beautiful too. That's a very special dress, Stanley is going to have a great time taking it off you." "Stanley knows about." "Stanley?" Bree asked, stunned. "Of course Stanley knows," Emily said. "Everyone knows." "Who's everyone?" Bree asked, sounding alarmed. "Well, everyone in the Pearl Eagle department, and most of the people in the tax department too, thanks to Stanley." "How could they know?" "We tried to be so careful," Bree said, bewildered. "Careful?" "Sure," Emily laughed. "From the moment Stanley was assigned to work with us, he was looking for a way to get into your pants. For one reason or another, he felt drawn to you. Your reaction to his clever advances was classic. Almost immediately, you started dressing differently, shorter skirts instead of pants, low-cut sweaters instead of blouses, high heels instead of flats, and more makeup. He even got you to wear his favorite perfume. Then there were all those secret touches that no one was supposed to notice, and the dinners together. You were like an open book. Where have I been? I thought. How did I not notice anything? Bree couldn't come up with a coherent response. I didn't realize it was so obvious. It was only supposed to be a little flirting. Then I fell for Stanley. Eventually, we admitted we had feelings for each other and wanted to be as close as only a man and a woman can be, at least once. I started to show my irritation. Well, now you can, I said as I draped Bree's shawl over her shoulders and opened the door for her. Don't come back until mid-morning tomorrow, I added, gently pushing her onto the front porch. I never thought about you, Bree lamented. I gave you every opportunity to stay home with me, but you chose to spend the night with Prince Charming. I hope you enjoy the choice you made. You broke my heart. My final words before closing the door were, have fun tonight. I'm sure I will, she replied. Bree stood on the porch for a minute or two before her shadow disappeared into the night. I heard her start the car. I felt sad. I hadn't been able to convince Bree to cancel her date and stay with me. Things would never be the same again. Emily noticed my sigh and the sadness in my eyes. I can't imagine how you feel, Ty, but remember what I told you, no matter what decision Bree makes, you win. She kissed me. I responded by putting my arm around her waist and pulling her closer. Our kiss turned into a long, deep French kiss as our bodies pressed against each other. Both of us were breathing heavily. I told her that dinner wasn't entirely ready yet, but she could help if she wanted. When we entered the kitchen, I pointed out 3 open bottles of wine, a light Chardonnay, a rose, and a rich red Cabernet. She chose the Chardonnay. After I poured her a glass and she took a sip, I handed her an apron and tied it around her waist from behind. After a quick kiss, she laughed and asked what I wanted her to do. I need about half a pound of bacon chopped into 1-inch pieces and mixed with the lettuce and endive. Then you can dice the avocado and add it to the salad. While Emily was busy doing that and sipping her wine, I started feeling a bit down. I was standing next to the most beautiful woman in the world, and yet, I suddenly felt inadequate. Compared to me, who had only ever been with one woman in my entire life, she must have had much more experience with different lovers over the years. I approached her from behind and placed my hands on her waist. I've never made love to anyone other than Bree, I admitted. I'm a little worried I won't be as good as the men you've been with before. Emily leaned back against me. I'm not worried, darling. Just do to me what you do to her, and we'll see where it takes us. If I want something different, I'll tell you. The same goes for you. If you want something from me, I'll do it, whatever it is. I kissed the back of her head. Thanks. Were you ever a cheerleader? You inspire confidence in a man. Thanks, she replied. The salad is ready. She carried the salad bowl to the dining room. I helped her sit down and took my place at the head of the table. Before starting dinner, I refilled our wine glasses, and we toasted to an unforgettable night together. I can't improve on that idea, I responded. Dinner went smoothly, though I had to get up several times as we finished one course and started another. Emily admired the food and remarked that it would be a feast anywhere in the world. When I finished my ice cream, I told Emily to relax in the living room while I cleared the table. Once the dining room was spotless again, I joined her. Emily was listening to the sound of the approaching storm in the music playing on the stereo, gently swaying to the rhythm. When I approached her, she struck a playful dance pose, and we enjoyed the soft music together. This is so romantic, darling. I'm having a great time, she said. Me too, I responded. You should know I haven't been with a man in a long time, and I haven't been with many men. But the ones I was with, I genuinely liked, and I really like you, darling. It's good to know, I said. As we swayed together, she added, I mean it. While we're together, and even if we part ways, I want us to remain the best of friends." It wasn't long before we stopped dancing and simply held each other, her arms around my neck, her fingers gently running through the hair at the back of my head. We pressed against each other, and I'm sure she felt my heartbeat. I pulled back slightly and began kissing her neck and throat. I was starting to lose myself in the moment when Emily gently stopped me and stepped back. "Give me a few minutes to change into something more comfortable, and then we can sit by the fireplace and relax." "You can change too if you'd like," she said with a smile. I changed into my black silk pajama pants and a matching black silk t-shirt. I poured myself a cup of coffee and added a splash of Bailey's Irish cream, then sat on the sofa to wait for Emily. A few minutes later, I heard her behind me. Before I could turn, she wrapped her arms around the back of the sofa, slipped her hands under my shirt, and kissed my neck. I turned to look at her. She was standing behind the sofa, wearing an open black satin robe, revealing a black nightgown underneath. Her hair was down, cascading over her shoulders. I took her hand and guided her over the back of the sofa until she was sitting on my lap. She was so alluring that I couldn't help but kiss her. At first, it was a gentle, sweet kiss, but soon her lips parted, and we kissed passionately for a long time. My hands moved over her body, and I slid the robe off her shoulder, revealing more of her nightgown. I ran my hand over her smooth skin and pulled the robe down until it slipped off her body and fell to the floor. I drew her closer and took her left hand in mine. Then I carefully removed her engagement and wedding rings from her finger. "I don't want you to touch my Prince Charming while wearing the rings I gave you on the day of our engagement and our wedding," I said. Bree looked troubled as she placed her rings, along with my wedding ring, on the small table in the hallway. She looked a bit embarrassed, and after a few seconds, all she said was, "Okay." As she turned to grab her shawl and purse, the doorbell rang. We could see a silhouette through the etched glass of the door. Who could it be at this hour, she wondered aloud. Since I was closer to the door, I opened it. I kissed Emily's body softly, moving lower with each kiss. She started to shift restlessly. "I love you, Ty," she said between deep breaths. "I love you too, Emily," I responded, almost without pausing. I didn't want to pull away from her, knowing it would be the last time. Emily must have felt the same way because she started to cry. I turned her around and hugged her tightly, kissing her on the lips, face, and neck. Finally, we both sighed, understanding that our night and morning of passion had come to an end. I was the first to leave the shower, giving Emily time to finish getting ready. When she came out, I had a large, fluffy towel ready for her. I dressed casually, as did Emily, who had brought a change of clothes with her. "Would you like to go out for Sunday brunch?" I offered. Emily quickly agreed, and I took her to a nearby mall where the Cheesecake Factory had just opened. It was 10 a.m. When I got back home around noon, I noticed Bree's car in the garage. I entered the house through a side door and walked through the kitchen into the dining room. I noticed a coffee pot on the stove, so I poured myself a cup. I saw Bree sitting at the table, waiting for me, with a cup of coffee in front of her. She looked very serious, while I was completely relaxed, smiling like a cat that had just eaten the canary. I figured I should address the elephant in the room. "Well, how was your night?" I asked. "Everything was fine," she responded. "And yours?" I felt I had to be honest. To be honest, it was the most exciting night of passion I've ever had with a woman. Emily was incredibly affectionate, and we did everything we could to please each other. I saw Bree lower her head, and a tear rolled down her cheek. I felt terrible. It was the biggest mistake of my life. "What happened?" I asked. "Was Stanley not the passionate lover you were expecting?" "It wasn't Stanley," Bree said, sniffing. "It was me. I couldn't stop thinking about you and Emily and what you two were doing. She's so beautiful and seductive. I knew you'd be having much more fun with her than I was with Stanley." He tried to be gentle and wanted to do everything possible to ensure we had a romantic night, but I couldn't stop thinking about you and Emily. I started drinking wine at the bar before we even sat down. Stanley tried to stop me by taking me to the dance floor, but by then, I was almost completely drunk and unsteady. So he suggested we go up to our room. In the room, Stanley tried to kiss me, and I didn't like it. Eventually, I decided to just let him have me. I lay on the bed without feeling anything, no emotion, no passion, nothing. He sensed my total lack of physical interest in him, and when he finished, he said, "This was the worst experience I've ever had. What's wrong with you? You wanted this as much as I did, and now you're acting like a prude." He looked at me with disappointment, got dressed, and said, "I can't believe I wasted so much time and effort seducing you for it to end like this. I've wanted to be with you since the moment I saw you. Stay here if you want, I'm going to the bar to see if I can find someone better." As soon as he left, I just cried myself to sleep. When I woke up, the sun was shining, and it was almost mid-morning. I thought by then I'd be alone at home. So, I took a shower, got dressed, and left the hotel. When I got home, you weren't there. Emily and I went out for breakfast, and then she went back to her house. Since I had such a great time last night, I'm not too sorry that your night was a disappointment, but I do regret getting involved with Stanley. Now I understand that he just wanted to be with me, he didn't care about me in the slightest. Well, maybe you'll have better luck next time, I said sarcastically. There won't be a next time, Bree said, her tone serious. I'll never do this again. I want to go back to how things were when we were exclusive. I want to be monogamous again. I want to leave this incident behind and be happy together, just you and me, forever. I promised you that if you didn't interfere with my date, I'd become the best wife in the world. I meant it, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it to you. Not so fast, Bree, I said. You've spent the past few months in an emotional relationship with Prince Charming and the last 2 months planning how you could have fun together. And now, just because things didn't go well, you want to go back to how things were before. That's not going to happen. I'm not sure if I want to stay married to you. You've hurt me more than I can express. You betrayed our marriage, humiliated me, and tried to turn me into a fool. Then, you expected me to just get over it and accept your mistakes as if nothing happened. That won't work. Next year, I'm going to get a gym membership. Once a month, I'll allow myself to go on a date, any woman I choose. If I end up in a relationship, so be it. At the end of the year, I'll reconsider our marriage. If it still doesn't feel right, I'll divorce you. If, perhaps, I'm happy with how things are, I'll think about being exclusive again. You'll have this year to prove to me that you're worth staying with. You can accept these terms or not. If you don't, I'll start divorce proceedings on Monday. Let me know what you decide. I love you, Ty, Bree began, her voice trembling, but I took you for granted, and now I know it. It would kill me to know you're with another woman, just as it killed me last night. However, the last thing I want in this world is a divorce. Losing you would destroy me. So, I'll accept your terms and keep my promise to be the best wife in the world, so that by the end of the year, you'll know without a doubt that you want us to stay together. It's decided, then, I said. I didn't know if I would actually date other women during the next 12 months, but I wouldn't hesitate if the opportunity arose. For the rest of the day, I planned to work in the garden and run some errands. If you don't mind washing last night's dishes and tidying up the house, I'll take you to TG's tonight, and we'll share an order of ribs. This proposal was my way of trying to normalize the situation going forward. I didn't want any problems between us when the trial year began. After a few weeks, things were going well. Bree was a very attentive wife and seemed genuine. The meals had improved significantly, especially dinner. Every dinner included a glass of wine. The meal usually consisted of a small salad or a cup of soup, followed by a light main course, like a 5-ounce steak with potatoes or rice and vegetables. She even added a small dessert after dinner. Bree would wash the dishes, and I helped by scraping off any leftover food and condiments. One night during dinner, Bree very casually said, "I talked to Emily today." I tried not to show any surprise and responded, "Oh. About what?" Bree continued, "You, me, and her." "What did she say?" I asked. "Well, the first thing she said was, 'Let's have lunch,' and she took me to one of her favorite nearby restaurants. I figured it was probably the same one she took me to. With a glass or two of wine and a salad, I asked her directly if she planned to take you away from me. She laughed and said, 'Not a chance. Ty and I were a one-night fling, and now we're just good friends. That will never happen again.' He was really disappointed and hurt by your actions. I think he still is." Bree said she told Emily, "I'm so ashamed of what I did to Ty and to our marriage. I know I can't undo it, but I promise to be a much better wife than I was in the past. I intend to keep that promise and hope he responds." Bree continued, "I also told Emily about your intention to date other women once a month and then reevaluate our marriage at the end of the year. She asked me what I was planning to do. I told her I would try to accept it, but it would be difficult. I'm sure I'll cry a lot while he's out on dates. She asked me if I thought you'd really date other women. I said that, in my opinion, it's possible, maybe not every month, but occasionally. Maybe you can do something about it," Emily suggested. "Like what?" I asked. "Give him an option, but without the possibility of being replaced. Make staying home with you so appealing that he'll turn down a date in favor of a special evening with his wife," she proposed. I told Emily I would do that. "So, if that's your plan," I said, "I might set up a fake date just to see what you come up with." A few weeks later, when I walked into the office of Thomas, Dix and Harris, I had a big smile on my face. Of course, Emily was guarding the entrance to the partners' offices. When she saw me, she got up from her desk and hurried across the room to give me a tight hug. "It's so good to see you again, Ty. I've been expecting you, or rather, Mr. Thomas has been expecting you," she said, still hugging me. "Do you know why he wants to see me?" I asked. "Of course, I do," she responded with a smile. "I know everything that goes on here. But Mr. Thomas will explain it to you himself." Emily returned to her desk and announced over the intercom that I was there. Mr. Thomas told her to send me in. Emily led me to the large office door, opened it, and let me in, closing the door behind me as she left. From behind his desk on the other side of the room, Mr. Thomas stood and greeted me with a wave. "Ty. Good to see you again. Please, have a seat. I called you for 2 reasons, both of which relate to you in some way, so I wanted you to be aware of them. First of all, I wanted to let you know that we've rewritten the fraternization policy at our company. It's now much more comprehensive and should help prevent situations similar to what you've gone through in the past, as it clearly outlines the serious consequences for interpersonal relationships between employees, as well as between employees and clients. I have a copy for you to read at your convenience. Let me know what you think of it." I thanked Mr. Thomas for considering me and the issue I had brought up earlier, without going into personal details. "Ty," Mr. Thomas continued, "how are things at home? I sincerely hope that you and Bree are doing well." He went on, "I visited Bree's department a few days ago and spoke with her. I didn't discuss her personal situation, but we talked about the ongoing work her section is handling, and I asked if there were any issues I could help resolve. From my observations, she seemed happy and content. Not wanting to delve into the current state of things between Bree and me, I simply said, things are better. I'm hopeful, and I'm praying that we'll be okay in the long run." "I'm glad to hear that," Mr. Thomas replied. "The other reason I wanted to speak with you is that I'd like you to hear a letter I sent to Jugs, DeBet Lewis, the law firm where Stanley Wilbur works. Regardless of his personal relationship with Bree, he did an excellent job assisting us with a tax matter we didn't have the expertise to handle at the time. That said, Mr. Thomas put on his glasses, took out the handwritten letter, and began reading. Dear Steve, you have an official report on Stanley Wilbur's performance regarding the assistance he provided us during his time at Thomas, Dixon Harris. He was instrumental in helping our lawyers resolve many issues related to this case while simultaneously teaching them how to handle similar cases in the future. However, this private and formal letter is intended to describe another side of Stanley Wilbur's performance that was less acceptable. He initiated a personal relationship with one of our married employees. This prolonged seduction led to physical contact with the married woman before his departure. By then, her husband was well aware of the encounter. This affected their relationship and severely damaged their marriage to the point where its viability is uncertain. In general, public opinion about lawyers is not very positive. Most people believe lawyers want to win at the expense of justice or earn money at the expense of their clients. The only thing we truly have is our integrity. The honesty of Stanley Wilbur in his personal life is questionable, and I believe his lack of honesty in personal matters can easily be attributed to his professional ethics as well. For this reason, I advise you to be cautious regarding the legal responsibilities Stanley Wilbur handles on behalf of your law firm. Once again, this is an informal letter between you and me only. Take whatever action you deem necessary against this lawyer, or take no action at all. I leave it to your discretion. Your friend, William Thomas. Mr. Thomas set the letter aside and said, "This letter doesn't fully do justice to what Stanley did to you and Bree, but it will at least hinder his advancement at the firm, certainly not as fast as he might have hoped. This is what I can do for you, Ty. I hope you're somewhat satisfied knowing that Stanley didn't get away with it without consequences." I thanked Mr. Thomas for what he had done on my behalf and left his office. I was deep in thought when I realized Emily was standing next to me, trying to read my expression. "It's okay," she said. "I'm pretty happy with how everything turned out and how things are progressing. I owe you a lot for being my friend through all of this." "Thanks," I replied. "Don't forget, Ty," she said, hugging me and pulling me close. "I also learned a lot from this. I loved you very much while we were together." "And I loved you too," I responded.